What's going on, everybody? RJ Ochoa here from SB Nation's bloggingtheboys.com. Hope all is well wherever you are. We hope you're happy, safe, healthy, and right here at the top, I'd like to thank all of you who have served our great country and all of you who have family members, friends who have served our great country. I want to thank you on this Memorial Day. We could not live here in this place, in this country with the freedoms that we have if not for the thankless, the unbelievable, the unknowing sacrifices you have made for us. So thank you to those of you who have served, and thank you to those of you who have family members, friends who have served. It is a sacrifice, obviously, and we are eternally grateful to all of you. It is Memorial Day, obviously, for me as I'm putting this video together for you. Monday, May 27th, 2024. My two dogs are in the office with me, so we'll see how this goes. Today, we're going to be discussing something really interesting. Last week, NFL.com had a projected starters. Actually, I should word this differently. NFL Media's Greg Rosenthal does this series every year. It is his projected starters for every single NFL team. And obviously, we're going to be talking about what he sees for the Dallas Cowboys. It's kind of interesting. I just got done, as I'm putting this video together, writing about this. So we'll have an article available probably on Tuesday up at the site, bloggingtheboys.com, where you should be checking things out all the time, by the way. And if you haven't yet, please consider subscribing here to the Blogging the Boys YouTube channel, where you can see me all the time discussing, talking about, analyzing the Dallas Cowboys, having discussions with people as we're doing the exact same thing. If you like what I do, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, or Threads at RJ Ochoa, or on TikTok at RJ.Ochoa. But as mentioned, Greg Rosenthal does this exercise every year, projected starters, where it is just that, right? It is doing our best now that the major construction points of the offseason in terms of free agency, the NFL draft, are behind us. We anticipate and expect the Cowboys to maybe do something, right? At least, maybe not before training camp, but while at training camp. We've seen them do that in the past. Malik Hooker was a player they brought in while at camp. Anthony Barr. The list kind of goes on and on. Cavante Turpin, obviously. They've obviously had a few, movements at the kicker position in the past while in Oxnard as well. So without further ado, let's get it up on the screen. Now, I want to look at it two different ways. This is the NFL.com article, and I want to look at it a little bit differently, like I said, but it is what it sounds like, projected starters. So we'll go kind of top to bottom here. The left side of your screen, besides me, is the offense, and the right side is defense. There's a lot of returning experience for the Cowboys here. You got Dak Prescott at QB, the difference at running back with Tony Pollard now in Tennessee. Greg has Rico Dowdle here. I think I speak for all of us in saying that we think this is going to be Zeke Elliott, right? I mean, if I had to guess, Zeke Elliott's going to have the lion's share of touches for this backfield when the season is ultimately said and done. But I understand putting Rico Dowdle here. Nonetheless, I would just do things differently. Let's move on. CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks, returners from a year ago, obviously. Jalen Tolbert replacing, so to speak. Michael Gallup, now a member of the Las Vegas Raiders. Jake Ferguson. Cowboys having a starting tight end repeating, or returning, I should say, from one year to another for the first time since Dalton Schultz in 2021 and 2022. Because you think about it, last year, obviously Schultz had left for the Houston Texans and Jake Ferguson took over. So some nice consistency there. We've seen Dak Prescott, always speaking of consistency, have success with his top tight end. The offensive line is where things are very different for the Cowboys. At left tackle, they've penciled in Tyler Guyton, the first-round rookie for the Cowboys out of Oklahoma. Tyler Smith, probably going to be one of the best interior linemen in the NFL this year. I think we all expect Tyler Smith to take a sizable jump in year 3. Cooper Beebe is, listed at center here, which is very exciting, and I think what we all want to see. Zach Martin, of course, at right guard, and Terrence Steele at right tackle. Defensively, a lot of familiar faces, a lot of familiarity in that overall sense. Micah Parsons, Osa Odighizuwa, Mozzie Smith, so to speak, replacing Jonathan Hankins, who left for the Seattle Seahawks in free agency. DeMarcus Lawrence, Eric Kendricks, the big free agency signing for the Cowboys. Damone Clark, and then the secondary, Trayvon Diggs, Deron Bland, Jordan Lewis, Donovan Wilson, and Malik Hooker. Okay. Initial takeaways, initial thoughts, lots of veteran experience with the Cowboys. That was kind of my first impression when I looked at this list. And I know that we have questions, and we remain frustrated with the Cowboys, and some of the frustrations that we have can be fixed and addressed and amended, and it could have been done differently. But if the Cowboys take care of, say, Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb and hopefully Micah Parsons before the season ultimately begins, I think we'll all ultimately be willing to let bygones be bygones. It could have been cheaper, but again, water under the bridge, hopefully, is what that ultimately becomes. But there is a lot of returning experience for the Cowboys, and that was something that I really wanted to look at. So let's put this back on the screen, and then I'll put the way I structured this up for you. Again, I would swap out obviously Zeke Elliott for Rico Dowdle, but everything else makes sense. I can't find a spot that I disagree with in terms of the projected starter. Now I know at OTAs the Cowboys had a different offensive line out there. That's to be expected. I'm going to imagine it probably won't be until maybe the second week of training camp that we see the likes of Tyler Guyton and Cooper Beebe running with the ones. That is just a process that takes time. I know that we have questions about Mozzie Smith, obviously, but what can you do? I mean, he's a starter, right? Like I know that it's concerning, but you can't change that. I can't change that, right? We're just kind of stuck in that spot here. So that being said, I wanted to kind of look at this differently, which is what I said I did. So that being said, let me get this up on your screen here. Share screen. It's a fancy schmancy Google Doc. So shout out to me, obviously. Here we go. There we go. All right. So what I did here, and I would zoom in, but it would obstruct your view. So I'm not going to do that. Apologies. But let me see if I can change this. Nope, that doesn't do anything. This doesn't do anything. Oh my gosh, what's happening here? Nope, that doesn't do anything either. Let's go back. All right, sorry. I was messing with this on the fly, seeing if I could figure something cool out. Okay. So what I wanted to look at was each player's path to the Cowboys, and that's what you see here. And in the article that I wrote, I put this Google Doc, so you can see it there as well. Like I said, it'll be out on Tuesday in all likelihood at our site. So I put these top to bottom because it just made more sense that way. So top to bottom, Dak Prescott, obviously 2016 draft pick, 4th-round pick. That's 2016 it's 2016 draft, 4th-round draft pick. Rico Dowdle, undrafted free agency in 2020. So not a big deal. CeeDee Lamb, 1st-round draft pick. Brandon Cooks was acquired in a trade last offseason, obviously. Jalen Tolbert was a 3rd-round draft pick 2 years ago. Jake Ferguson, a 4th-round draft pick in that same class. Tyler Guyton, 1st-round pick. Tyler Smith, 1st-round pick. Cooper Beebe, 3rd-round pick this year. Zach Martin, 1st-round pick. Cowboys have 3 1st-round picks on their offensive line now, which is very cool, obviously. And Terrence Steele, an undrafted free agent in 2020, and has come a very, very long way. Defensively, the Cowboys, obviously, 1st-round draft pick Micah Parsons, 3rd-round draft pick that same year, Osa Odighizuwa, Mozzie Smith, last year's 1st-round draft pick. We mentioned, obviously, how the Cowboys kind of have to depend on him because of that. DeMarcus Lawrence, 2nd-round draft pick now 10 years ago. It's amazing. People forget that he was a part of the same class as Zach Martin. Eric Kendricks, the big free agency signing, obviously, as mentioned. Damone Clark, 5th-round draft pick 2 years ago. Trayvon Diggs, the 2nd-round draft pick in the CeeDee Lamb draft. Deron Bland, a 5th-round draft pick 2 years ago, which means he'll be eligible for a contract extension a year from now. We'll see how that goes. Jordan Lewis still hanging on. He has had such a great career with the Cowboys. 3rd-round draft pick 7 years ago. Shout out Monica Geller. Donovan Wilson was a 6th-round draft pick 5 years ago. Obviously got the extension with the team last offseason. And Malik Hooker, I talked about at the beginning, was an undrafted free agent who the Cowboys brought in at training camp in 2021. So what is worth looking at here? What is the kind of bigger takeaway? Because we can talk about the names on a list and we can look at what they mean, et cetera, et cetera. In my viewpoint, some of these players aren't exactly new starters. And I recognize that they are in a literal and technical sense, but I'm going to highlight them for you here. So as we go top to bottom here, Dak obviously is a returning player for the Cowboys. Rico Dowdle will come back to. CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks, returning player. We've got Jalen Tolbert. There's one. All right. Jake Ferguson is not a returning, or excuse me, is a returning player. Tyler Guyton is 2. Obviously, he's replacing Tyron Smith. That's a big deal. Tyler Smith, obviously, is a returning player. Cooper Beebe is a new face, right? Okay, what we're looking at here, I'll put Rico on this list because this is how I want to look at this. We're looking at players who are literally new starters that weren't for the Cowboys the majority of last season. This is how I thought through it, and I think it was helpful for me, and I think it will be helpful for you. So we've got 4 players here who are going to be starters, at least are projected to be, that weren't for the majority of last season. So we got Rico Dowdle, Jalen Tolbert, Tyler Guyton, Cooper Beebe. Okay. Micah Parsons obviously was there. Mozzie Smith is our next one because we had Jonathan Hankins going on, obviously, a year ago. Eric Kendricks is another, effectively replacing Leighton Vander Esch. You could argue that Damone Clark may not be here. DeMarvion Overshown. That's getting into the weeds a little bit here. I'm going to skip that just for the purposes of today's discussion, but just know that he represents another option as well. I'm going to add Trayvon Diggs because he did not play a majority of last year. We'll come back to this point in a moment here, and everything else is rather chalk. Okay, so we've got 7 players. Of the 22 listed here, we have 7 that are effectively new, that were not a part of the team last year. Do you get what I'm saying? Okay, great. Now, of these 7, what context can we add? Well, we can add the context that Trayvon Diggs has been a starter for the Dallas Cowboys for most of his career. So, while he is a new player, relative to last year, he's not somebody who has no experience starting for this team. Okay. Eric Kendricks, while he is a new player to the Cowboys, he is a very seasoned NFL veteran. He has a lot of NFL starts under his belt, and he knows Mike Zimmer's defense, the new defensive coordinator for the Cowboys, better than anybody on this list. So Eric Kendricks, while a new starter, so to speak, not exactly a green player. Now, moving on here. Rico Dowdle, all due respect, is probably not going to be the starter at the running back position for the Cowboys, as discussed. That being said, I'm not going to type in Zeke Elliott here, but we're going to assume that Zeke Elliott is ultimately that guy. And if Zeke Elliott is ultimately that guy, he has an enormous amount of experience starting not just in the NFL, but for the Cowboys and in this offense and with these players. I mean, that point is extraordinarily obvious. So Zeke Elliott doesn't really count as far as new players are concerned. You get my point. We're contextualizing the new starters. My overall point is that this ultimately comes down to four players who are replacing players who left the Cowboys in free agency. We've got Jalen Tolbert, who probably has the easiest task in front of him relative to the players he's replacing. He's replacing Michael Gallup. We've got Tyler Guyton, who's got an extraordinarily difficult job ahead of him in replacing Tyron Smith. Cooper Beebe, not much easier in replacing Tyler Bionis, and Mozzie Smith, who is effectively replacing Jonathan Hankins. The season, in some respects, I don't mean to be dramatic here, will come down, and we're assuming that everybody else lives up to expectation, which is why this is not exactly a perfect science. But that being said, the season, in some senses, will come down to these four players living up to their predecessors. Jalen Tolbert living up to what Michael Gallup offered the Cowboys. I know we have low expectations of Jalen Tolbert, but Michael Gallup didn't exactly set the world on fire last year. If he provides even that, I think that would be a net win. If he provides more, obviously, Tyler Guyton, Cooper Beebe, to expect them to be Tyron Smith and Tyler Biotis right away is just silly. Okay. But if they can be serviceable, then, the offense can continue to thrive and continue to flourish. And Mozzie Smith, if you notice, there's only one name on defense here, right? And I know that the DeMarvion Overshown thing is a kind of a unique variable in the equation, but Mozzie Smith is the only sort of new player that we're relying on. Again, I recognize Eric Kendricks is on that list and Trayvon Diggs is on that list in some way, shape, or form, but Mozzie is really the only one who's coming in with an enormous amount of expectation. And the fact that there isn't anybody around him suggests that he'll at least have help from his friends to help the transition be all the more easy. But the overall point here is that you can see defensively, a lot of what this team is able to do on that side of the ball is going to depend on whether or not Mozzie Smith can live up to, obviously, his draft pedigree. And if he does, great. And if he doesn't, well, that kind of sucks. But the Cowboys are a bit painted into a corner in terms of relying on him in this way. But there is a lot of commonality. There is a lot of continuity on the defensive side of the ball. Offensively, there is as well. However, the points where there aren't are, kind of important. Like, you got left tackle, you got center, you got a wide receiver. And while there is a new starter in Jalen Tolbert over Michael Gallup, he at the very least is somebody who has 2 years worth of experience with Dak Prescott and in the offense, et cetera, under Mike McCarthy. I mean, you get the overall points a little bit different. There's a way you can kind of talk yourself into that working itself out. But this was kind of helpful, I thought, for me to feel better. I know we've all felt down in the dumps about the Cowboys in certain ways and in certain respects over the offseason to this point. But if you look at it, I mean, it's fair. I understand on a very, very, very small level, the Cowboys saying we don't need to partake in free agency because we like the guys that we have on their roster. I would still argue that you should add depth and you should be focused and obsessed with adding more and more and more and more, because any one of these players could regress or whatever could happen, and all of a sudden you're up a creek. But I understand the thought in a vacuum, especially when looking at it this way, which is why it was a helpful exercise for me, and I hope it was for you as well. Mozzie Smith is kind of the story of the Dallas Cowboys in 2024. Who would have thought? And you know what? Like, theoretically, if I told you, okay, the veteran who left in free agency, talking about Jonathan Hankins, is going to be replaced by last year's first round draft pick, that sounds awesome, right? Like, in a vacuum, in fact, in a theoretical vacuum, that should be the design. You should have players. That's what we praise the Eagles for all the time, right? They lose players like Jason Kelsey or Fletcher Cox or whatever, and they seemingly have plans already in place. That kind of was what this was with Mozzie Smith. He just has not exactly given us a reason to believe it's going to work itself out. But hopefully he proves our speculation wrong. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing here to the Blog on the Boys YouTube channel. We have videos coming out all of the time. I have videos coming out all the time talking about the Dallas Cowboys. My name, who am I? RJ Ochoa. I think I worded that weirdly. My name is RJ Ochoa. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, or Threads at RJ Ochoa, or on TikTok at RJ.Ochoa. You can also send me an email at rj.ochoa@sbnation.com if you would like to do so, or you can leave a comment down below, and I will do my very best to get to those. For now, I bid you adieu. Once again, thank you to all of you who have served our great country and those of you with family members and friends who have, for the sacrifice that you have all made. We are forever in your debt. Thanks so much for hanging out, everybody. See you next time.